Inspired by these beautiful landscapes, I'm going inside and I'm going to create some fir trees. So I've cut myself a piece of resist. This is the plastic. I use builder's membrane actually, and it's really good because you can fold it and it's malleable. So cut out your cone shape as so. And then I've got this amazing merino wool that's infused with Angelina fibres. Angelina fibres are long strands of glitter, unlike the small glitter that you get and is easily transferred into the environment. This glitter is in long strands and it remains within the fibre. So it will stay within the piece that I'm going to make, so there's no worry about it going into the environment. I don't like using too much of it, but in these magical pieces, as I like to call them, when you look at the snow earlier, you can see how it all glistened. And this will recreate that kind of glistening effect. So bear with me. Just notice how I'm laying out the fibre, pulling it very finely and laying the pieces that I pull off on top of each other, making sure that you can't see any of the black plastic underneath. The black plastic is going to act as a resist. It's called a resist actually in felt making terms, and it's going to stop one side of the felt sticking to the other, because we're going to completely cover this piece of black plastic in the wool. So I'll carry on laying out the fibres, and then I'm going to add soap and water. So when you're confident that you've got enough fibre on it, put the net over the top and then add soap and water. I'm using my amazing little spritzer. You can buy these online. I'll add resource lists to my videos. That's something I keep meaning to do. Before I had these little bulbs, these sprinklers, I used to simply get an old milk bottle, a plastic one, and put some holes in the top, and then it could sprinkle on the water in the same way. So I've pressed down the water firmly, and now using olive oil soap, you hold your work with one hand and then simply gently glide the soap across your work as so. So using one hand, I simply peel back the net, making sure that I don't lift any of the fibres. In some areas it looks quite transparent. Don't worry, you've not got holes, it's just that the wool has soaked up a lot of the moisture. So holding on to the edge of the plastic, I simply flip it over and then carefully fold down the fibre that's overlapping. Making sure that as you fold it over, the edges are quite tight. And then we're simply going to put more fibre over the black plastic again. So I've speeded up the video here, and if you want to felt along with me, just simply stop the video and pause it as you catch up with me. I'm repeating what I just did on the other side, placing enough fibre to not be able to see the black resist. And I'm making sure that it's all nice and flat, and then you can pick it up and flip it over again. Now I'm pretty confident that you can't see the black resist anywhere. You don't want this piece to be too thick. And so I'm giving it a good rub now to make sure all those fibres are going to be interlocked and turning into felt. And you simply do this by rubbing for several minutes. I'm just picking off bits of bark that somehow had got into the wool. So keep rubbing. And what I find a little trick that is very helpful is folding your net along the edges of the resist. It then makes sure that the fibres are well and truly stuck close to that edge. This is a tool that I use. It's a felt maker's rolling pin. It's really good for providing lots of extra friction. It's got these little notches cut out of it. You can buy these online in any good felting supply shop. They come from Nordic countries. They can get a bit rough on your hands sometimes, so there's different ways of felting. And you just carry on rubbing now. I only like to touch the fibres without the net when I'm confident that they're well and truly felted together. Otherwise you'll find that they come off and they start to stick to your hand. So here we are. I'm confident that the piece is coming together well, and I've just cut off the ends of those fibres at the top of the tree, and I'm felting them together with my hand. They're a bit too long, and I didn't want to fold them back down the tree because they would have made lumps. So when you're confident that all the fibres are together and you can take the net off, then you can do it with your hands. There comes a certain point when you know that all those fibres are felted together that it's actually turned into one homogeneous piece. By that I mean that all those fibres are no longer separate and they've created a piece of fabric known as felt. And obviously to get to this stage it does take a good few minutes of felting. And just to be on the safe side, I'm just putting the net back on. I would never roll directly onto the fibre because you run the risk of lifting any loose fibres in the rough part of the rolling pin. And when you're confident enough that it's well felted, then we can move on to the next stage, which is removing the resist. So far there is no shrinkage with this wool. It's simply knotting all those fibres together. Felting can be done in many ways. You don't need to use one of these tools, by the way. You can use anything that creates friction. Simply rolling it up in the bubble wrap and rolling it back and forth, or you could put an old piece of bamboo mat, underneath the plastic, the bubble wrap, and make like a roll. I'll show you that in another video. That's a classic way of making felt. But essentially, all you need is something that creates friction. Now I'm ready to cut the resist out, so I just cut along the bottom. As you notice, I've done it in a curved line, not a straight one. And you pull out your plastic resist. That resist just stops one side sticking to the other so that you can create a 3D object. And this is the next part, which we call the fulling stage, the shrinking. Just squeezing out a little bit of the soap, a little bit of the water, sorry, just to make it a little easier. And you can see I'm simply felting it between my hands now, in between throwing it onto the surface, but just squeezing it and rubbing it like a piece of dough, if you like. You can only do this stage though when you're confident that the sides aren't going to stick together. So before you pull that resist out, make sure that the fibre has gone into fabric. You would know how that was if you tried a pinch test. I'll show you a pinch test in one of my next videos, but that just checks whether the fibres have gone into one piece of fabric or not. And I continue throwing the piece down, getting it to shrink. It's one of my favourite things to do. Every now and again, just checking that those fibres are not sticking together. By that I mean inside. Put your hand in and make sure that it's still a cone. It's going to be a 3D cone. You can see it starting to shrink now. And then just give it a little rub on the bubble wrap. Every now and again, changing the sides. You can see you can't actually tell where the plastic resist inside was. I keep changing it. So there are no seams, which is the beauty of felt making. You make these 3D objects with no seams. So just keep carrying on, rubbing, which will make the cone shrink, opening it up, checking that nothing's sticking together, checking that it's all nice and flat, and just keep throwing it to shrink it even more. Now I'm confident that it's well shrunk. It's actually quite firm now. It shrunk a fair amount. I should have shown you the difference in size to the resist, but it's probably shrunk about 30%. If I shrunk it to what I call the nth degree, it's usually about 40%, but I'm happy that this is going to be stable enough. And now I'm going to cut little V cuts into my Christmas tree. I keep folding it and then putting a little V, and I'm alternating where I put the V. They're not in line. I want to put them all around the tree. And you'll see why in a moment. Because these little cuts, these little snips, as I continue to felt the tree, they're going to stick out, and these little cuts are going to resemble the branches covered in snow. And then eventually I'll put a candle underneath it, and these will be like little windows which the candlelight will shine through. Not a real candle, but one of those little LED ones. And it's just so effective. They're like little table lamps. You can use them as a Christmas decoration, or I like to have mine out throughout the winter, just to give a little bit of ambient light, especially in the evenings. It makes it feel all cozy. Make sure that your little snips are all in the same direction, but alternating where they are. So instead of them being in rows, they're kind of zigzagged throughout the tree. And I simply keep opening the tree and find another seam, if you like. I've made a little bit of a mistake on my first one. You can see there I've cut two snips too close together, so be wary not to do that. On the next ones that I make sure that my snips are not too close together. So learn from my mistakes and just keep your eye on where your snips are. You can go right up to the top of the tree. There's some spaces there, so I just put one or two more snips in. Sorry, it's just come off the camera. I'm still very much a novice when it comes to filming, so I hope that with each video I get better. I don't know about you, but sometimes I do things a little bit too fast. Anyway, I'm going to carry on shrinking this now in the same way that I was. Little rub, little throw, little rub, little throw. Putting your hand in, and at the point where you feel it could stand up on its own, that's the point of full shrinkage to that 40% that I was talking about before. And then you can begin to pull at these little branches, making them stick out a little bit more, and checking to see if it would stand up. By now, most of the water has disappeared out of the piece because I've massaged it and felted it. So this is a smaller one that I made after the other, and I've got a lot better at cutting the holes, and I've also realised that it makes it a bit easier to cut it when it's dry, so you might want to take that on board. although cutting it before it's dry means that as you continue felting it, the little branches stick up. So you can try which one you prefer, cutting when it's wet or cutting when it's dry. But this is another example of cutting it when it's dry. So just like the other one, I made the cone shape and I'm now putting the nicks in. Perhaps it's a little easier to do when it's dry, to be fair. And you can see as I cut them, I open them up and then I turn it. And you can see I'm cutting them in between the spaces, not directly underneath each other. Having a bit of randomness is even better because nature is always random. Yes, on reflection, I think actually it's better to cut them when they're dry. So here I am just adding the final little snips to get those branches looking a little bit longer. And I'm pulling them out with my fingers. And I'm just loving the way that it's glittering. It's dry now, giving some tiny snips right at the top. And pretty confident that this one is about finished. And they stand up so well. They're just so pretty. And here we have it. So I've got some LED little candles and I've put them under the trees and they are glowing like beautiful magical fir trees in the snow. I hope you enjoyed this video, and whilst these do look like Christmas trees, they look so pretty throughout the whole winter season. Bye now and see you soon.